Housing and Community Development, the Honourable Ayaz Syed Qayyum. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, I stand to thank His Excellency for his most gracious speech. Mr. Speaker, sir, I will focus on a number of issues that His Excellency raised, a number of which, of course, has been very aptly elucidated by members from this side of this chamber. Mr. Speaker, sir, I would like to do what I call a fact check in respect of what has been raised. Then I'd like to start off first off with genuine democracy in the 2013 Constitution. Mr. Speaker, sir, under this Constitution, under the leadership of our Prime Minister, the Fiji First Government has actually ushered an unprecedented era of equity and genuine democracy built on the strong foundations of our Constitution. Never before have the rights of all Fijians, including of all ethnic backgrounds, being so deeply protected through a very comprehensive Bill of Rights, which includes the socio-economic rights. Mr. Speaker, sir, we have of course had the forays by the opposition, always putting an ethnic tinge. They talk about the 1997 Constitution, and they are elected under this 2013 Constitution. The 1997 Constitution, Mr. Speaker, sir, as we all know, had divided the nation along ethnic lines or racial lines, giving preferential treatment to a handful of elite. For example, Honourable Tambuya, you'd be interested in this, we had communal seats. Under the 23 communal seats, and let me remind the members of Parliament, the 23 communal seats reserved for the Itauke people, only 6 were actually for what we call urban Itauke people. Even though nearly 50% of Itaukes now live in urban areas, they would have had under the 1997 Constitution only 6 of the seats out of the 23. Similarly, as I pointed out before, the gerrymandering that took place, even under the Itauke seats, Mr. Speaker, sir, the province of Nandronga, which had 19,000 voters, could elect only one person. The province of Namosi, which had 3,000 voters, could elect one person. Deemed to be illegal in many countries. You cannot have 19,000 people electing one person and 3,000 people electing one person. That means the weight of the vote, value of the people in Namosi is almost 5 times more than the people of Nandronga. Many other examples too. Only the province of Dakonrobe, Tailevu and Ba could elect 2 people. All the other provinces could elect only one person. These are the things they do not tell this Parliament. They do not tell the Fijian people, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, of course, it was utterly racist. It was along ethnic lines. It was built on the racist constitution, the 1990 Constitution, which everybody knows. It was ushered in at midnight without any consultations, and it formed the basis of the 1997 Constitution, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, I would like to also, therefore, question what do they mean when they talk about democracy. It is a bit like those people who supported the 1987 coup, who wrote articles and said, democracy is a foreign flower in Fiji, and we should not have democracy, to justify the events of 1987. Today we have the same kind of thinking, where because they are not in control, they are not in power, they are now saying that this democracy is not working for them. Let's go back to the 1997 Constitution. Some of them talked about the Yashgai Constitution, which actually said we could have same-sex marriage in Fiji. They don't talk about that. They need to go back to their constituencies and tell them, Honourable Bula Nauda, you stood here and harped on about the Yashgai Constitution. It talks about same-sex marriage. Go and tell them. Tell that to your constituency. Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, again, Mr. Speaker, sir, they've gone on about how they will win the next elections. Mr. Speaker, sir, I quoted something I found out from the Hansard. Honourable leader of Sodelpa, the leader here, Honourable Gavoka, he had said, after the 2018 election results, he said, he had said, as I've said this morning, once the opposition decides to call us, Fiji First is toast. You have not got a hope as a political party. You've not got a hope. You might as well go home, Honourable Speaker. There's no way they can continue winning the elections. And I had said to him in response, Mr. Speaker, sir, I had said, Mr. Speaker, sir, they've been selected, there have been a barrage of attacks on the Honourable Prime Minister, and I think the Honourable members are riding high in what I call the SLR glamour train. Chitivani Lalambalavu Rambuka. And that glamour train, I'm telling you, and the shine is wearing off really quickly. Lalambalavu? Linga Mamanda, sorry, I got confused. Chitivani Linga Mamanda Rambuka glamour train. And that glamour train, I'm telling you, that the shine is wearing off really quickly. Guess what? The shine's gone completely. And I remember some of our supporters after the results of the last elections were somewhat despondent about the results, saying there was such a narrow margin. And I said to them, God works in mysterious ways. And I tell you why. Because today, in the past 1 week, has been a perfect example of how you have demonstrated to all the Fijian citizens, and in particular voted for you, your inaptitude, inability to run an effective government. And I tell you, Honorable Gavoka, you said we'll be toast in the next elections. We will, God willing, be the toast of the town in the next elections. That's precisely what's going to happen. That's precisely what's going to happen, Honorable Speaker, because since then, they have disintegrated. And even though this cabal of people who are sitting here, Honorable Gavoka has been stabbed from the left, from the right, from the back, but not from the front. You need to do that, Mr. Speaker, sir. The reason why I raise this, and I'm not interested in the shenanigans of the party. I'm not interested in that. All I'm trying to tell, Mr. Speaker, sir, all I'm trying to say, you see, the reaction actually hits them hard, really hard in the heart. The reason, Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm only raising this is because if they cannot govern themselves in opposition, how can they govern themselves in government, Mr. Speaker, sir? Mr. Speaker, sir, the Honorable Lalam Balavu spoke about debt. Mr. Speaker, sir, the debt to GDP was 56%.
Order.
The debt to GDP was 56% in 2010, Mr. Speaker, sir. It was brought down to 45.8% by 2015, pre-Cyclone Winston. However, the sensitivity to natural disasters brought about climate change has required significant financing in the aftermath of cyclones. 12 major cyclones since Winston, 13 including Winston. After TC Winston alone, Mr. Speaker, sir, we had to borrow and spend additional $500 million for reconstruction of schools, public buildings and homes. Then we had hundreds of millions of dollars spent on reconstruction works required after TC Kenny, Josie and many other disasters. These disasters are not cheap, Mr. Speaker, sir, in particular to build back better. Mr. Speaker, sir, then we had a pandemic, a once-in-a-100-year event that caused a significant blow to government revenue, with tax collection declining by 50% overnight. Government has made a conscious decision, Mr. Speaker, sir, to borrow more, as did all other countries. Some of them, of course, engaged in quantitative easing. We had to borrow more to sustain public expenditure, to ensure roads, bridges, hospitals continue to run, to ensure civil servants are paid, to ensure that free education continues, to ensure that we continue to build and support social welfare recipients, to ensure that we provide income support to those who have lost jobs. We provided, Mr. Speaker, sir, $500 million. NFP, who was bringing some motion about using $50 or $80 million, we provided $500 million, Mr. Speaker, sir, direct and indirectly. We are paying over $100 million every year on social welfare. We have assisted 3,200 Fijians to own their first homes, Mr. Speaker, sir. 190 Fijians in this financial year alone, with another 100 still waiting approval. The funds have actually finished. There's so many people who actually want to build and buy their first homes, Mr. Speaker, sir. Honorable Wanganika, unfortunately, is not here, went on about the Housing Authority Board. I had a meeting with the Housing Authority Board. We talked about it, and they gladly resigned from the board, Mr. Speaker, sir. Nobody's fired overnight, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, in fact, the World Bank, ADB, IMF, AIIB, JICA, and other bilateral partners all supported our fiscal response to the crisis because they knew this was the appropriate response. That's why they had lent to us. And most of these debts, Mr. Speaker, sir, are concessional debt. We are getting loans to the World Bank IDA at 40-year terms, 10-year grace period, 0% interest rate. Zero. Never zero from the World Bank, Mr. Speaker, sir. And 0.75% service charge. These loans technically has a 57 grant element given its significant concessionality, 57 grant. We have JICA lending to us at 0.01% interest rate. 0.01% interest rate. And the ADB has just approved Fiji to be eligible for its concessional resources. When we go and talk about climate change, when the Honorable Prime Minister goes and participates in international fora, these are the things we talk about. Because of this, because of the discourse, because of highlighting our vulnerability, we are now getting concessional financing for ADB. We got concessional financing from the World Bank, Mr. Speaker, sir. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, while we are borrowing extremely concessional terms. We have over $700 million in concessional debt. So it is not right to compare this debt to debt borrowed at market rates. Mr. Speaker, sir, all this noise about debt rising to $8 billion has to be carefully assessed. When you take a more sophisticated approach, more nuanced approach, more intellectual approach, which obviously the opposition lacks, even the so-called professor. Mr. Speaker, sir, the fact of the matter is this. The fact of the matter is this. If we were financially mismanaging our economy, as they claim, if we were doing all the wrong things, if we were not adhering to the Public Management Act, Financial Management Act, these people would not lend to us. If we were not doing this, Australia and New Zealand for the first time has given us direct budget support. Unheard of. Unheard of in Fijian history. Direct budget support. We have to jump through hoops and loops to adapt to different financial measures. Mr. Speaker, sir, and the point they miss is this. If we are borrowing to build now, Mr. Speaker, sir, the future generations don't have to borrow to build then. If we are undergrounding the cable now from Nandi Airport to Matintar, they don't have to put the cable underground. If we are building a 4-lane road now, which will cost far less than building in 20 years' time, we are saving money. Honorable P.O.T. Kundundua, you know this. Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir. Another point, Mr. Speaker, sir, the debt to GDP ratio has also increased to over 80% of GDP because the nominal GDP, Mr. Speaker, sir, has contracted substantially. So in other words, if your GDP value has gone down, it's gone down from 11 billion to 9 billion, obviously your debt to GDP ratio will increase. It's basic maths. It's like saying, if somebody has $100 and you borrow $20, your debt to GDP ratio is 20%. If somebody has $500 and you borrow $50, even though it's double the amount of the $20, your debt to GDP ratio is 10%. But if your $500 drops down and still borrow $50, obviously it will increase. Very basic. Mr. Speaker, sir, this is why the whole strategy, as the Prime Minister announced months ago, the focus on vaccination was to ensure that we open up our economy. If you open up your economy, and when you have 35 to 40% of your entire economy dependent on tourism, then obviously you will be able to get your economy back up running. So the strategy was to get vaccinated. And we did that. One of the first few countries in the world where 90% of the adult population have been fully vaccinated. We have from the opposition, Honorable Bula Nauda saying, don't get vaccinated. Honorable Gavoka saying, get vaccinated. Can you imagine? Can you imagine if they were in government? What would have happened? The Fijian population would have got mixed messages. We've had people quoting from the Bible, with people justifying don't get vaccinated, other people making all sorts of comments. What is required is strategic leadership, strategic direction which is provided, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, the reality of the matter is that, as I've always said, is that we now have the 15 to 17-year-olds getting vaccinated. We have 102,000 to 105,000 Fijians who fall between the age category of 12 to 17. 1/9 of the population. We are targeting them too. We're building a safer environment, safer medical and health environment for them too, including all the tourists who come to Fiji. Mr. Speaker, sir. Fact check 3, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, the leader of SODELPA on one hand complaining about debt and immediately goes on about with his pie in the sky promise to write off TEL's debt, to make tertiary education completely free, and to remove VAT that will further diminish government revenues. Let me give some statistics, Mr. Speaker, sir. Then, before I do that, then he, in the next sentence, complained. He said, why does he have to now, under the law, give as to how his policies will be funded? He says, while he's going to make this promise without any costing at all, he goes on a full defensive about why political parties should provide details on the policy proposals, as required under the now Financial Management Act, Electoral Act. Because you can't fool the people. You can't go and say, I'm going to send all your children for free education at university. He's going to tell them how he's going to fund it. Let me tell you how much it's going to cost, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, SODELPA's proposal to waive off TEL's debt will mean government will write off $600 million in TEL's debt and incur further $200 million every year to fund tertiary students. Forget the free education from early childhood to year 13. This is just tertiary education. And if he removes VAT altogether, we're going to lose $700 million in revenue a year. Even if you were to remove VAT on some of the, what we call the basic items, we lose $100 million. Where will he get the money from? Where will he get the money from? Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, we have said in the past, Mr. Speaker, sir, we have said in the past, we have said in the past that VAT zero rating creates distortion. In particular, if you don't have an administrative system that can monitor it well. This is why, Mr. Speaker, sir, we put in place the Vat Monitoring System. It became a legal requirement that every supermarket, every store must have VAT monitoring system. Some of it we put on hold, and we said pharmacies too. Some of it we put on hold because of this particular economic situation. But once you have all of the systems in place, Mr. Speaker, sir, then you can look at how you can perhaps get VAT away from some of these basic items. And that's what we, of course, intend to do. But you need to be on a solid financial basis. Mr. Speaker, sir, Honorable Prasad, unfortunately, again, he's not here. He talks about removing the 20 cents per litre tax on fuel without a word about how much would be lost in government revenue. And how would they compensate for it? Are they going to borrow more? Are they going to increase any tax? Will they increase personal tax? When the Honorable Prime Minister was made Prime Minister, if you earn $8,400 a year, more than that, you pay tax. We made it $8,800 the following year. Then we said, if you earn less than $16,000, you don't pay tax. Then we said, if you earn less than $30,000, you don't pay tax. Corporate tax is 20%. So if they're going to do this, does that mean they'll increase personal income tax? Does that mean they'll increase company tax? What will they do? Will they impose some other tax? Will they bring in STT? Will they do increase ECAL? No word on that. Intellectual gap, intellectual void, Mr. Speaker, sir. And, Mr. Speaker, sir, I would say integrity void. Mr. Speaker, sir, we of course have a 5-year and a 20-year national development plan, which obviously we have to revise in respect of the COVID-19 pandemic. We have delivered over 15 national budgets. We clearly outline our vision, policy, inclusive philosophies. We have now a medium-term debt strategy. This government has delivered on climate change. We have developed a robust national climate change policy. We have developed a national adaptation plan for Fiji to guide climate resilience. We have developed the low emissions development strategy that will guide Fiji towards a low carbon future by 2050. We have also developed a national ocean policy that is designed to accelerate Fiji's blue economy aspirations. What have the opposition delivered apart from hyperbolic criticism? Nothing. They have nothing. They have nothing, Mr. Speaker, apart from hollow promises. They say it's our job. If you go to democracies, which they always like to quote Australia and New Zealand, the opposition has the intellectual capacity to actually develop those things. The opposition has the political and administrative will to say, look, they've developed this policy, they've consulted lots of people, we will adopt that also. But they're so politically egotistical that they won't do that. They just simply won't do that. Mr. Speaker, sir, Honorable Lalam Balavu went to great length talking about the economy and said economic growth has been erratic and below potential of 5%, annually due to dictatorial management, corruption and misuse of power. Mr. Speaker, sir, obviously speech writers don't know what they're talking about, which probably is Peter Weiss too. Economic growth has not averaged 5% or above in any decade since independence. It has always been below potential rate of 5%, Mr. Speaker, sir. The highest average growth rate was in the 70s at 4.8% after the development works post-independence, while the second highest was in the last decade from 2010 to 2019 at 3.3%, Mr. Speaker, sir. Historical growth has indeed been very erratic, reflective of small economic base, natural disasters as well as global and local geopolitical events, Mr. Speaker, sir. However, in the last decade, Mr. Speaker, sir, for the first time, we had 9 years of consecutive growth. That's what we keep on talking about, is the consecutive growth. No point saying, oh, in 1989 there was, 9% growth. But what happened the years before that? What happened in the years after that? Consistency is the key. Australia has grown for about 20 years. Growth rate was 1%, 1.5%, 2%, but they've grown nonetheless. They don't understand that. In order to be able to build confidence, to have GDP growth, you need to have consistency, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, the number of statistics here, but in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through that, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, prior to the pandemic, the last official unemployment rate published by FBOS for 2017 was 4.5%, which had declined considerably from the previous survey in 2010 and 2011, when the unemployment rate was 7.1%. So obviously, Mr. Speaker, sir, it was not for the pandemic the unemployment rate could have improved even further. Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, they also talked about the $5 minimum wage, Mr. Speaker, sir. Obviously, they are not considering what situation we are in. If I could remind Parliament, Mr. Speaker, sir, it was the Bainimarama government that brought in the national minimum wage for unskilled work. We never had that. We never had that. There was a minimum wage for the 10 sectorial divisions. Since then, Mr. Speaker, sir, there has been 2 reviews.
Order.
Since then, there's been 2 reviews. Mr. Speaker, sir, since then, there's been 2 reviews. I would like all the small businesses, the mum and dads who employ 1 or 2 people, the small businesses, the mechanic, the lady who's selling handicraft, maybe employing 2 people, I want them to hear what Honorable Tambuya is saying. In this pandemic, for past 2 years, they have not had a source of living. They are now, because of this pandemic, starting to re-engage people. And you tell them, let's start paying $5. You tell them, pay the full FNP of 10%. What do you think they will do? The people, Mr. Speaker, sir, I had the privilege, and thank you for allowing me, Mr. Speaker, sir. Yesterday I was in Nandi when the first tourists came. You should have seen, Mr. Speaker, sir, the look of euphoria, not just on the faces of the people who worked at the hotel industry, but in their eyes. The lady who worked for Rentokil cleaning the toilets at Nandi Airport, she's come back to work. The taxi driver, the tour manager, the staff. The people lined up the streets to the hotels from trees, waving them, because they know it's not just about people who work directly in the hotel industry, but people who actually have a living off the hotel industry. So the airport workers who are now coming to work, they have money in their pocket, so they'll go and buy the boiled EV from the lady who sells boiled EV outside the airport, the lady who sells a roti parcel, the people in the market. So it's actually an entire ecosystem that's built around the tourism sector. Obviously, we've been diversifying the economy. If you look at the statistics, the diversification of the Fijian economy was not as great as it is today. Nonetheless, we're heavily dependent on this tourism sector. We need to diversify, we'll continue to diversify, but in the meantime, we have to recognize the fact that these people need to be able to carry on with their living. The small businesses need to be supported. We are giving $200 million of allocation in the budget, so they get interest-free loans. Don't do any principal payments for the first 2 years. Government is paying it for them, the interest component, so they can get up on their feet. And these people are saying, do it now, because they think, it's not for any economic basis, because they think there's some votes in it. They think there's some votes in it. In the same way, Honorable Gavoka suddenly has become Johnny-come-lately, the great advocate for squatters. Where were they before this? He's probably done a tour of the Nasori Suva corridor, seen the squatters. This man here, Honorable Nawaikula, has a lot to blame for it. There are a lot of people in Lambasa there. But they've now suddenly decided, okay, there are votes in it. This is the only government under this Prime Minister that is now regularizing squatter areas, giving 99-year leases, 99-year leases, and suddenly they want to become great advocates of squatters. He even went to the extent of saying people who are living in Vaka Vanua arrangements without consent should be getting electricity. He said, oh, they should be connected to electricity. But the land is owned by somebody. They have to consent. But this is all short-term gain to get votes. Honorable Kurin Rani went on this diatribe against me. I mean, he does that. He's got nothing of substance to say. But the only thing I wanted to highlight to him, Mr. Speaker, sir, he said there are more important issues than climate change. His village is getting a seawall. His village, funded by the ministry, is getting a seawall. That's directly because of climate change. But just to show this man's integrity, I had one of his relatives calling me, please. I had one of his relatives calling me a few months ago and said, AG, you know, my relative, he's using his car to go and get people in the next village to sign up to Rambuka's party. Can it be reported? For me. I got the text. Mr. Speaker, sir. And he said to me, can he be reported to the supervisory election? I said, no. I said, if you want, you can. I said, if you want, I know you're not the driver, but it was your car, Mr. Speaker, sir. But if you want, I said, if you want, you can report him to Sodelpa. Mr. Speaker, sir, these are the kind of shenanigans that's going on. Mr. Speaker, sir, I've got a lot to say, but I'd like to finish off, Mr. Speaker, sir. I know in the interest of time. Mr. Speaker, sir, the one point that I'd like to make, we have seen in the past few weeks, and I've said this continuously in Parliament, Mr. Speaker, sir, that members on the other side break out into the vernacular. And what we have said, Mr. Speaker, sir, is that this Parliament is for everybody. This Parliament, when we say it's for everybody, it should be understood by everybody. Should be understood by everybody. It continuously they do that, without even translating, Mr. Speaker, sir. Why? Because they're trying to appeal to a particular segment. When they make those comments, most of the people, or obviously some of the people who speak the Itauke language, understand it. The others don't. You alienate them. I have never uttered, once I said, Mr. Speaker, sir, I used the word, Mr. Speaker, sir, I used the word are. And Honorable Tambuya said, oh, it's good to see he's exercising his mother tongue. Are is not a mother. Are is actually what we call a lingua franca. It's an exclamation, Mr. Speaker, sir, a lingua franca exclamation. In the same way we say oile, isa, vinaka. Everybody in Fiji understands that. We can say that. It's what you call the lingua franca. But when you break out in stuff you don't understand, in the way, and I've never done this, but I'm going to do it today. If I say, all of the opposition are bina pendi ke lota. You see, they are laughing. You don't understand. You see, you don't understand. You don't understand. It is so alienating. This is the first and only time I'm going to say this. But no, I'm telling you, I qualified myself. I said, it's the first and only time I'm going to do it. Just to demonstrate a point. I'm going to translate it now. Bina pendi ke lota, it basically means a lota is a vessel that holds water. And if it does not have a base, it moves around all the time. It cannot stay in one place. Like you guys. You don't have one direction, one policy. In some instances, bina pendi ke lota can also mean lumuri. That's what it means. But my point is, Mr. Speaker, sir, like I said, this is the first time I'm going to say this and only time, but the only reason I said that is that all of them, the ones who understood the language, they laughed. You did not, because you did not understand it. Can you imagine the next time when you do that, when other people don't understand, how do they feel? That's my point. That's my point, Mr. Speaker, sir. Translation does not do it, Honorable Bulauda. You have no credibility, Mr. Bulauda, Honorable Bulauda. You are the man who stood in the streets of Suva advocating for racism. Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, Mr. Speaker, sir, I just wanted to very quickly highlight one last point. The attack on Honorable Selai by the Fiji Times, Mr. Speaker, sir, when she called out the Fiji Times. What really demonstrated, and Fiji Times came on the defensive. They said, oh, you know, we are independent, we don't do, etc. The main point that they failed to mention in their response, which Honorable Selai highlighted, she highlighted how Fiji Times deliberately said that the military was the cause of the issue on the vaccination, because of the military. And they said IDEA said that. And IDEA actually came back and corrected them. Yes. And Honorable Selai, when she highlighted that, when Fiji Times responded to her, they did not quote that at all. This is the kind of obfuscation that's going on, Mr. Speaker, sir. And I want to highlight, because we're going to elections next year, to see the close quarter relationships. On record, Munro Lees are the lawyers for NFP, they no longer are. They're still the personal lawyers for Honorable Prasad and his wife, because they've written letters which I've seen. Mandro Lees are the lawyers for Fiji Times, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mahendra Patel has run away from the law, is hiding in Sydney. A bench warrant is out for them. He's their interest in Fiji Times, directly or indirectly. What we have said previously, if you're a media organization, if you have a particular political position, there's nothing wrong with that. Fox has a position in supporting Trump. Everybody knows that. You watch Fox, you know they support Trump. If Fiji Times has a political, editorial position, so be it. But state it. Don't hide behind this so-called, we are independent. Same thing with Fijivillage. Don't do that. There is a post on NFP website, and it says here, one organization is state-owned. This is about the journalists who went to COP, and has been provided more than $80 million in grants, was the fact that both are heavily funded by taxpayers' funds through grants and advertising, as well as their bias, Were they selected by diplomatic mission, or was it based on government's recommendation? We had nothing to do with it. No diplomatic mission highlighted. And I have here a text message from the editor of ABC, Indra. He said, he rang up Honorable Prasad, he did not answer. Then he called Kamal Iyer of NFP and informed him that this was wrong. But he said, to date, nothing has been done. Honorable Tikundundo, you're the only one here. Please look at this. It says, the trip was not funded by government or the British High Commission. It was through ABU, Asia Broadcasting Union, Mr. Speaker, sir. This is the type of shenanigans that are taking place. They come here and pontificate about this government not being transparent, about us not telling the truth, but that's what they're doing. They're so desperate. Mr. Speaker, sir, I just like to, one last thing, because they've gone on about COP, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, the undermining of Fiji's participation in COP26, particularly by members of opposition, just a taste of the blatant bitterness and division, and also, I think, just a political gain for them. Despite the Prime Minister informing them numerous times, please, Mr. Speaker, so if you can allow me to explain once again that not a single taxpayer dollar was spent on Fiji's COP26 participation. At COP26, expenditure was paid by the donors to the Climate Action Trust Fund. These donor funds were specifically given for Fiji's participation in COP26, and we used it just for that. In particular, European Union, Norway, Germany, United Nations Capital Development Fund, United Nations Framework on Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC, the Women's Environment and Development Organization, which funded a couple of the ladies who went, have supported Fiji's COP26 participation. Mr. Speaker, sir, now we have, of course, Mr. Speaker, they forget that the COP26 related expenditures will be audited and tabled in Parliament as part of the annual audited reports of the Climate Action Trust Fund. This has been the norm for all COP-related expenditures since COP23. It is mandated by the Climate Action Trust Fund Act. If you read the Act, it says we have to present it to Parliament. This Parliament has already debated on 2 such reports. The committee has already done that. Yet the opposition chose to stir public dissatisfaction against, of course, the participation, again, downplaying climate change, Mr. Speaker, sir. It's quite shameful. Mr. Speaker, sir, more details. More details. According to the COP26 provisional list of participants, out of the 196 countries that registered to attend COP in Glasgow, there were 96 other countries that had a larger delegation than Fiji, of which 62 were developing countries. Mr. Speaker, sir, Maldives, which has a population of 540,542 people, they took 56 delegates. Seychelles, which has an even smaller population of 99,000 people, they took 53 delegates. Comoros, a low developing country in Africa with a population of 869,000 people, took 50 delegates. Congo, 373 registered participants. Uganda, Gabon, Australia, of course, a larger delegation. Nepal, Mauritania, in the West Indies, if you put them all together, larger delegation. But let me give you a breakdown, Mr. Speaker, sir, from our delegation side. Of the 47 people registered under the Fijian delegation in the provisional register, list published by UNFCCC, 40 travel while the rest remain in Fiji. So we have people sitting here participating, but they're registered as delegates. So out of the 47, 40 participated. Out of the 40 that traveled, 7 were non-governmental personnel who had their own funding. So you see, if they did a breakdown, if they were honest about it, 7 were because they wanted to get accreditation under some country. So we gave them accreditation. 7 were from the Pacific Islands Forum. Commonwealth Secretariat, and the World Wildlife Fund. 7 of them from there. No funding for them, but they got accreditation. Of the 33 government officials, Mr. Speaker, sir, 5 were from the Fijian Mission in the United Kingdom. They were already there, they worked there. They came from London to Glasgow. And 1 from the Fijian Mission is the ambassador who came from New York. And 2 were already, 1 in UK and 1 was USA, already there. So 25 officials, Mr. Speaker, sir, were part of the traveling team from Fiji. This is the true story. They never failed to ascertain that. They went to the media. I saw Honorable Prasad making statement. Then the British High Commissioner came and made a statement we saw from Glasgow saying, I wish Fiji had a larger delegation, or delegation is good. Then they retracted, oh, we want accountability. Then they got some NGOs to give them. They said, oh, this NGO is speaking the truth. But what about the issues that are elucidated? Honorable Tuisawau, morning tea time, afternoon tea time, we talked about it. How you have different groups negotiating. And the average age of the team that traveled, Mr. Speaker, sir, participated between the ages of 25 and 35. I say, Mr. Speaker, sir, what they have done is actually given a huge insult to our young delegation. Because this young delegation, they're developing the expertise. In the next 5, 10 years, they'll be able to further our interest at the COPs. If you look at the delegation of other countries, they have been negotiating for the past 10, 15 years, same team. They know each word, each phrase, line by line.
Order.
And we are trying to build capacity, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, the other point that I wanted to make was, very quickly, Mr. Speaker, sir, in the COP26. It was one of the most successful multilateral climate engagement for Fiji since COP23. The President and the Prime Minister, of course, had a high-level engagement, sufficient number of Fijian negotiators in the negotiating room, put Fiji amongst the powerhouse of the countries fighting for the climate and Paris Agreement rule book to be finalized, Mr. Speaker, sir. We participated in over 50 high-level negotiations. This is apart from the negotiating room. Bilaterals and events, let alone the countless hours spent by our young but diligent negotiators in the closed-door technical negotiations, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, we signed an agreement with the Australian government called the Indo-Pacific Carbon Offset Scheme. Fiji will be among the first countries in the world to benefit from the Australian $60 million available under this program to develop a carbon offset scheme between Fiji and Australia. Basically what this means, Mr. Speaker, is that Fijian resource owners and investors in renewable energy initiatives, both domestic and foreign, can generate carbon units that can be sold to Australian companies at an attractive price. This creates strong incentive for sustainable climate action here in Fiji that builds natural resources intact and attracts investment in renewable energy, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, Honorable Gerungere Tambua talked about, I think she was advised by the people who went there who were representing them. They've obviously misguided her. Fiji's RED Plus market arrangements in collaboration with the World Bank are up to 2024. Until then, Fiji will be in an arranged market arrangement that will ensure a guaranteed carbon market price for Fijian forest owners and build carbon monitoring, reporting and verification capacity of Fijian authorities. Post-2024, of course, which is 2 years down the track, Fiji's RED Plus participants will be able to engage in carbon trading in an open market with the confidence and experience from the World Bank program. It's like a pilot program. Mr. Speaker, sir, she should also know that Fiji's RED Plus program has a benefit sharing plan that has been thoroughly vetted by the World Bank Environment and Social Safeguard criteria. Mr. Speaker, sir, every resource owner under RED Plus will get an equitable share of proceeds from the carbon trading. The other point that they have also forgot to mention is that, Mr. Speaker, sir, RED Plus trading schemes does not, Mr. Speaker, sir, include mangrove resources, seagrasses, and other blue carbon as well as renewable energy projects that can immediately be, people can participate in the carbon markets through Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. We managed to lobby Australia to increase its climate finance commitment by Australian $500 million for the Pacific and Southeast Asia, Mr. Speaker, sir. Fiji is currently co-chairing with the United Kingdom a special body known as the Task Force on Access to Climate Finance, which has developed a robust set of principles and recommendations to help climate-vulnerable countries better access climate finance. Fiji is one of the first 5 countries in the world to test how this approach. The United Kingdom has pledged £100 million for this initiative. Fiji will now actively work with the government of the UK to get a large chunk of the money pledged. Apart from Fiji, there is Rwanda, Jamaica, Uganda and Bhutan. There are 4 other countries that have been selected under this program, and we get accelerated financing under this particular program. Mr. Speaker, sir, and of course oceans, we've talked about how oceans has now been included, Mr. Speaker, sir. We've also promoted at COP26 the launch of our first blue bonds. We are currently working with the Prince Charles-led the Sustainable Market Initiative His Royal Highness the Prince Charles of Wales will put together financiers, insurers, etc., to be able to ensure that we get attractive rates, Mr. Speaker, sir, as far as the blue bonds are concerned. Mr. Speaker, sir, there's a lot that I can be said, but I'm cognizant of what has happened in terms of the time. But, Mr. Speaker, sir, I would like to say that we have supported a number of people in these past 2 years. It's great to see the light at the end of the tunnel. We, of course, still have to be cognizant about the fact that there's still some Fijians who are yet to be vaccinated. The Ministry of Health is trying to reach out to them. We urge all the other Fijians who are vaccinated, but their family members or communities that they know are not vaccinated, please get vaccinated. It's in your best interest. Let's get our children vaccinated, because we need to carry on with our lives. We need to be able to build up our economy, Mr. Speaker, sir. And last not but least, Mr. Speaker, sir, I would like to thank His Excellency for his most gracious speech. There's obviously a lot that can be said. I have had the pleasure of having interaction with His Excellency, the President, in his role when he served as a director on a number of boards. I'd like to thank him for his participation in that in a number of public enterprises. And we obviously are blessed to have a leader like him, who obviously has been appointed on his own accord, on his own merit, because he has the mana, he has the credibility, he has the ability to stand up in himself to be able to represent us on the global stage, Mr. Speaker, sir, and also domestically. And Mr. Speaker, sir, I'd like to wish him and his good wife all the best, and I'd like to wish everybody in this house, Mr. Speaker, sir, a very Merry Christmas and a happy and a prosperous New Year. Naka, thank you.
What's this point of order?
Order 80 and 81 on explanation and misunderstand, particularly on vaccinations. Honorable Minister for Economy stated that I oppose vaccination. Honorable Speaker, sir, I do not oppose vaccination. I had been vaccinated for polio. I had been vaccinated for measles. Those are tested vaccines. What I'm opposing are untested vaccines. And secondly, Honorable Speaker, sir, the forced way, the process that they're making, it is not voluntary. My point is to voluntary. You need to fully explain to the people, to the client, what is in the vaccine and what's the effects thereof. You still, when you have a double dose, you still can get vaccination and still can transmit it, Honorable Speaker, sir.
You've made your point of order. Finish. Honorable, you've made your point of order. Take a seat. Yeah. Take a seat. Honorable Pulanova, it's common knowledge that you opposed it. It's common knowledge. I know. I know. The thing is, no, I know the point that you are making. I understand that. But the thing is, that was the perception that people had, that you kept on going about it. You didn't take any precautions to try and prevent them from saying that. You just carried on with the thing. I knew the point that you were trying to make. But before I give the floor to the writer reply, honorable members, I just want to talk about administration of time amongst all members. Because you don't work on administration your time for your presentations. Now, this side of the House has got more minutes available, and this side of the House has got more minutes available. But you don't administer the thing. I do my work here on what time has been used, what time has not been used. I put a minus and plus, and I take it off. The thing is, administer your time, and you can make use of the... He was using the time that was left over from other speakers. And I've used that when others have got. The only group that makes use of their time, and sometimes they do it overboard, is the NFP. They all speak up to their time limit. Or sometimes they go over. And you have 20 minutes each, all of you. But there's always people who only speak for 9 minutes instead of 20. So there's always this access left. But I won't hold you to your lunch. We'll have the right of reply for His Excellency's most gracious speech tomorrow. This afternoon, after lunch, we'll go to the next agenda item. So, on that note, we break for lunch.